The sixth episode begins with the Enterprise crew experiencing something rare aboard a starship, a quiet and ordinary shift. The ship is traveling towards Starbase 7 for upgrades to its Bussard collectors, but nobody is particularly excited about the assignment. Instead of focusing on exploration or danger, the crew is simply waiting for their workday to end and looking forward to spending their evening away from duty. At Stardate 1213.72, Nurse Christine Chappell records her personal log as the end of the Alpha shift approaches. The crew has already started making plans for their free time, with everyone looking forward to music and drinks at the port galley. Ensign Rankin is scheduled to play piano that night, and even Captain Pike comments that the Enterprise does not use its piano often enough. On the bridge, Ortegas is distracted by thoughts of relaxing when Pike reminds her to stay focused. Although the mission seems routine, Pike notices that everyone is already mentally off duty. The Enterprise is supposed to make a simple trip to Starbase 7, complete the upgrades, and continue its journey. However, the peaceful atmosphere quickly begins to disappear. In sickbay, Chappell and Dr. Mbenga prepare for their upcoming shift while discussing the return of Dr. Philip Boyce to the Enterprise. Boyce previously served as interim chief medical officer, and Chappell wonders how he feels about returning to work under Mbenga. Mbenga explains that he personally requested Boyce's transfer because he wanted someone capable of taking over sickbay if something happened to him. Chappell is surprised by his answer and immediately says that if Mbenga leaves the Enterprise, she would leave as well. Mbenga recognizes that her reaction reveals something deeper about her feelings toward the ship and her future. He tells her that she has earned respect from the crew and that she is doing meaningful work aboard the Enterprise, but Chappell admits that she has always struggled with the idea of fully committing herself. Mbenga points out that Chappell often keeps an escape route available and tends to run when situations become too serious. Chappell responds that she has noticed many things about him as well, but has chosen not to say them. Their conversation turns into a difficult but honest confrontation between two people who have known each other for years. Meanwhile, engineering is preparing for the Bussard collector upgrades when an unexpected navigation alarm interrupts the work. Scotty and his team initially suspect a problem with the ship's code. Scotty is not impressed by the upgrades, joking that most improvements are already outdated by the time they are installed. He leaves engineering after instructing the remaining crew member to contact him if the problem continues. On the bridge, Pike prepares to hand command over to Lieutenant Rada. However, Rada notices that the Enterprise's warp trajectory has changed slightly. Ortegas does not initially believe the issue is serious, but Pike decides they should investigate before the crew leaves for the evening. The delay means the port galley plans will have to wait. While Scotty is inside a turbolift, engineering contacts him again with new information about the malfunction. He immediately realizes the problem is far more dangerous than faulty code. The Enterprise is being pulled toward a dangerous slipstream wormhole, and Scotty orders the immediate shutdown of the warp engines before the ship becomes trapped. The crew attempts to respond, but they are too late. The Enterprise is suddenly dragged into the phenomenon, throwing the entire ship into chaos. The vessel begins suffering severe damage as systems fail throughout the ship. Red alert sounds as Chappell and Mbenga's argument is interrupted. The Enterprise is violently shaken, and the crew must immediately focus on survival. Communication systems begin failing, bridge consoles become dangerous, and electrical surges spread across the ship. Pike orders everyone to avoid touching their stations, but when he attempts to access an engineering console himself, he is struck by an electrical discharge and thrown backward. With Pike injured and unable to command, Ortegas unexpectedly takes control of the bridge. The Enterprise is now trapped inside the slipstream wormhole, and the crew discovers that different sections of the ship can barely communicate with each other. The primary crew members are separated into different areas, each facing their own dangerous situation. In engineering, Scotty becomes trapped inside a turbolift while conditions worsen. Neutrino radiation begins reaching deadly levels, forcing the remaining crew to evacuate and isolate the warp engines. The Enterprise is losing power, and every attempt to stabilize the ship creates new problems. Sickbay suffers one of the most devastating impacts. During the chaos, a heavy lab table breaks loose and flies toward Chapel. Mbenga pushes her out of the way but takes the full force of the impact himself. When Chapel reaches him, she discovers that he has suffered massive injuries and is barely alive. The situation becomes especially emotional because only moments earlier they were arguing about their friendship and their futures. Now Chapel is faced with the possibility of losing one of the people who understands her most. She refuses to give up on him and immediately begins trying to save his life. With Pike injured, Scotty unreachable, and communications damaged, Ortega struggles to keep the Enterprise functioning. She uses the ship's inertial dampeners to stabilize the vessel, but doing so drains the remaining power. The crew must find a solution quickly because the Enterprise is approaching a warp threshold that could destroy the ship completely. Spock begins analyzing the strange phenomenon and identifies the scientific threat surrounding them. However, understanding the problem does not make escaping it any easier. The crew must limit movement throughout the ship because the unstable conditions could cause further damage. Scotty eventually receives help from Cadet Asha, who proves herself during the crisis. Although she understands Starfleet procedures, she also realizes that following every rule will not save them. She helps Scotty search for a solution while the Enterprise continues moving closer toward destruction. Pelia also assists Scotty and helps him manage the pressure of the situation. As the ship's engineer struggles with the impossible task ahead, she reminds him to trust his instincts and his connection with the Enterprise. Their bond as engineers becomes an important part of finding a way forward. As the crisis worsens, the crew develops a desperate plan involving Spock, neutrinos, and a jettisoned pod. They consider using a force that should not be possible to manipulate in order to save both the Enterprise and Mbenga. The plan requires the crew to push beyond known limits and attempt something that has never been done before. Back in sickbay, Chapel refuses to abandon Mbenga despite the danger. Their shared history as friends and former war survivors becomes the reason she continues fighting for him. She ignores the impossible odds and searches for any way to keep him alive. The crew eventually discovers that strong force neutrinos within the phenomenon could provide the energy needed to save the Enterprise while also helping Mbenga recover. Although the idea seems impossible, they have no other choice. Every department works together to carry out the plan. Spock's calculations, Scotty's engineering skills, Chapel's medical determination, and Ortegas's leadership all become essential. The crew pushes the Enterprise beyond its normal capabilities as they attempt to escape the slipstream before the ship is destroyed. After surviving the crisis, the Enterprise crew begins recovering from the damage. Mbenga manages to finish his recovery, and the moment allows him and Chapel to recognize the importance of their friendship. Their argument about leaving and staying behind feels different after everything they have endured together. The episode ends with the crew returning to the small moments that connect them. Mbenga even completes his joke from earlier, bringing some humor after the terrifying events they survived. What began as a normal shift before a trip to Starbase 7 became one of the Enterprise's most dangerous encounters, forcing the crew to rely on science, courage, and their trust in one another to survive.